all of the games they would go to on the road. There's no grief to take now because there's no fans to boo now. So Houston, I think the big winner, if you could say that, in that they don't have to deal with the booing unless, of course, we're going to pump in crowd noise. We can do that. We can pump in noise sometimes, right? Even applause. And if they pump in crowd noise that's boos, that would just be the coolest. But here's how they start. This is crazy. 4 games to start the year at home against the Mariners? Are you kidding me? Okay, so there are 4 games that I think the Astros, they could sweep a 4-game series right off the bat. And if you're 4-0, okay, with only 56 to play, but look what happens after that. Then they play 2 games against the Dodgers. Oh my gosh. Those will be great games to watch. That's must-see TV. 3 games against the Angels. 3 games against the Diamondbacks. And then they start playing the A's and the Giants. But the fact that they have 4 games to start the year, they can get those games under their belt against Seattle. I think it's a great way to start the season for the Houston Astros. So let's get right to it. Let's flip over to the National League. Which team has the best overall schedule for the year? Well, let me tell you. The Cincinnati Reds play a third of their schedule against Detroit, against Pittsburgh. Did you hear me? Against Detroit, against Pittsburgh, and Kansas City. Okay, so 20 games, Kansas City, Pittsburgh, and Detroit. The Reds. To me, that sets up Sonny Gray, opening day starter. Lenny told us that in the start to today's shows. The Reds are really in a pole position to make real noise in that National League Central this year. I mean, it's crazy. And I look around the National League East. The Nationals, we know they open with the Yankees. And we can look at their schedule after New York. They play Toronto for 4. Then they go to Miami. I think after they get past the Yankees, the Nationals have a pretty good start. Remember last year, first 50 games, the Nats were 19-31. They were 12 games under 500, 50 games in. They cannot make the playoffs and start off that way this year. And they are without a very important bat. They have announced that Carter Kieboom will start the year at third base for them. So it'll be interesting to see how Carter Kieboom starts out the year. Because if he does like last year, remember last year, Kieboom comes up in game 1, first at bat, and kaboom, he hits a home run. First major league at bat. And then he hits like 100 after that. And he's sent down to AAA, never to be rising from the ashes again in 2019. Now he's given the opportunity in 2020 to be the starting third baseman to start the year. If he starts out well, it's his job. If he doesn't, Asdrubal Cabrera is waiting in the wings, and he will take Kaboom's place. King Hap, good morning. Great show last night. Good morning to Ed Heckman. Good morning to Jack Youngblood. Good morning to Andrea and to Clarona and to Doug Boyle and to Lenny. Great show this morning, Lenny. And we have a guest in the chat room, and that is guest Iola. I wonder who guessed I like that name, Iola. Where is Iola? Let's log in and let's register and let's become about getting in this room and getting more discussion going. How about that? All right? So as we move down from the Nationals, the defending world champs, let's take a look at the Metropolitans for just a moment. Now, word is, Lenny said it, I've read it too, Cespedes working out at first base. You know, Cespedes is on this contract incentive-laden year, okay? He's got to play to get paid. Don't you wish everybody was like that? I mean, can you imagine the effort that would go into the game if everybody had this deal like Cespedes, how hard the games would be fought out and played? Oh, my gosh. So, Cespedes working out at first base, I think that just shows look, he wants to play wherever he can play. Now, they've got enough first basemen. In fact, their starters enough, right? But they have other players who can play first. We'll see how Yoenis Cespedes shakes out. I think he's a very intriguing fantasy option. The Mets start the year against the Braves. I love it. You know, that goes back to the 90s when the Braves were going to the World Series and the Mets were always a thorn in their side. And then finally in 2000, the Mets beat the Braves out. You know, it's just one of those classic, we don't like each other kind of rivalries. Well, they start the year against each other, and then the Mets play 4 at Fenway Park. And I think that's critical. They back that up. It's like a Atlanta Braves sandwich. The Braves for 3, the Red Sox for 4, the Braves for 3. Those are the first 10 games of the year for the Mets. So let's say Jake DeGrom is going to pitch against Atlanta twice in those 2 days, possibly. They probably will get Boston and miss Atlanta the second time, but who knows? But we know he's going to be opening day pitcher. We feel good about the Mets home opener on Friday, July 24, if we're a Mets fan. And then after that, it's Boston. Remember, Erod is down with COVID. Erod will probably not be ready to pitch the beginning of the year. And the Boston Red Sox starting rotation is not that good. Now, you couple that with the Mets rotation, which has been, you know, they got Porcello. We'll see how that goes. But hey, the Porcellos of the world get to pitch against the Red Sox. And those bats we still know the Red Sox bats are potent. So it's the back end of the rotation for the Mets, to me, that will make or break their season. It's not the front end, it's the back end. How will they look? How many innings can they go? Now, we know the Mets have Seth Lugo, who I think is going to be an incredible weapon out of that bullpen, particularly early in the year. Lugo, remember, former starter. He can probably log multiple innings. He will probably log multiple innings and give the Mets that bridge. I think he's a great fantasy asset because I also think by being that middle guy in the middle of the game, pitching the 4th, 5th, 6th, whatever, he's going to get some wins that you wouldn't ordinarily get from the starters. Then we got the Dylan Betances. How healthy is he? If Dylan Betances is healthy, boy, the Mets really have a bullpen. I mean, they have 3. Jeurys Familia. We know the bullpen at the back end is stacked, hard-throwing, right-handed arms. And Boston has a lot of power right-handed bats. J.D. Martinez. I think Devers will be critical in that series against the Mets, how he will rise up, play. Will he be hitters again? I think are going to be behind the pitching early in the year. And if they are, that's not going to be a good sign for the Red Sox or any team. The Red Sox will have to score runs. I think that's a great series for the Mets going into it. How they play against the Braves to be determined. But those first 10 games, I really don't have a feel for how the Mets will make out. It's going to be an interesting first 10 games of the year. Speaking of the Braves, shall we talk about them for just a moment and look at their schedule? I just told you where they are with the Mets, 6 of the first 10 against New York. Well, who's in between? Tampa Bay. So here we go. Atlanta has probably the toughest start to the year. And remember, Freddie Freeman, symptomatic, not asymptomatic, but symptomatic with COVID-19. We don't know when we'll see Freddie Freeman. And we talked about earlier in the week the situation at first base for the Braves, who may fill in at that spot. But I will tell you, having 6 in New York, 3 at home, 3 away, excuse me, not 6 in New York, but 6 with New York, 3 away, 3 at home, sandwiched between 4 with Tampa Bay, I think the Braves have a really tough start to the year. Again, what if the Braves go 3-7? And meanwhile, someone else goes 7-3. Now you're 15% through with your schedule, and you're 4 or 5 games out. I think Atlanta, we'll see about the Austin Rileys of the world, the Johan Camargos of the world. We'll see how they perform. I really think the Braves could be in trouble early. We'll see how it goes. They follow that up with 3 against Toronto, who everyone reports vastly improved. 4 against Philadelphia, at Philly, never a great environment for a visiting team. Of course, now it doesn't matter because there are no fans in the stands, so maybe that neutralizes that. And then they go to New York for 2. So we will see how the Braves make out. I just think they may have the most challenging start to a season of any of the teams we have discussed so far this year. The Central, I've talked about the Reds. I want to talk about the Cubs' schedule for just a moment. You know, the Cubs, they've got Schwarber going to be a DH probably. They start the year with with Milwaukee, 3 games, then 4 against Cincinnati, and then 3 against Pittsburgh. These 10 games for the Cubs, the Brewers, those games are winnable. They're at home. They go to Cincinnati. That's a bandbox in Great American Ballpark. They go to 3 with Pittsburgh. The Cubs could very well have a decent start to the year. Let's say they win 2 of 3 with Milwaukee. Let's say they split with the Reds. Okay, now we're 4-3, and let's say we sweep the Pirates. We're 7-3. If you're looking at it, if you're a Cub fan and you say we're 7-3, 10 games in, you'd have to feel really good about your season. I think 7-3, 6-4 should be expected. But what if it doesn't happen? What does it do to the morale of the team if instead of 6-4 you're 3-7? These are games early on that the Cubs should at least break 500. If they don't, I think it could be a long 60 games for the Little Bears on the north side. I just do. We'll take a look. I think their schedule is favorable. What do the Cubs do with that schedule? And then we go out west. The Dodgers, got to talk about them, the prohibitive favorites in the National League West. 7-time defending champion of the West. How about that? They start the year on the 23rd with 4 games. That's right. 4 games. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday against their arch rival, the San Francisco Giants, in Dodger Stadium, followed by 2 games at Houston, followed by 3 games at Arizona. Now, I know the Giants are not, on paper, a great team. But when you put the Dodgers and the Giants together, crazy things happen. So let's say they split. And then they go to Houston and lose both. And then they go to Arizona, and Arizona wins 2 out of 3. All of a sudden, the Dodgers are a losing record, 3 games under 500 after 10 games. Wow. What an interesting dynamic that would add to our season. So just a few things to think about. I want to talk about some players for a moment. We already touched on Hector Neris. And Hector Noesi, Hector Noesi, this is a Pittsburgh Pirate. Derek Shelton said Hector Noesi has decided to opt out of the season amid the coronavirus. Noesi wasn't even a lock to make the rotation or be in the bullpen, either one. He had an ugly 8.46, so I don't think there's much fantasy relevance there. Just don't. I want to look at the fact that Hunter Pence missed practice, has pain in his foot. Brandon Belt in a walking boot. Hunter Dozier bruised his hand. The Cubs have released Brandon Morrow. You know, he just never did it for the Cubs, did he? He just never caught on. And now he's out. He had a great year 3 years ago with the Dodgers. And it would not surprise me for the Dodgers to pick him up and give him a shot. I really wouldn't be surprised. Jacoby Jones, one of Lenny's boys. Jacoby Jones, home run in Wednesday's scrimmage. Jacoby Jones, a year I think that if he's going to prove something, he's got to do it now. Word out of Tiger Camp is Matt Manning is ready to go to the show and be a star. The word is he is ahead of other rookies drafted the same year around the same time. Matt Manning could be a fantasy force. Lenny talked about their closer this morning. And so, Detroit. I want to talk about Detroit before we close the show because nobody gives the Tigers much of a chance, right? And there's always that team that somehow surprises in some shape or form. So let's consider, if you will, I proffer to you the Tigers for just a moment. And their pitching